Committee will reconvene, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Ratcliffe, for 5 minutes.
Gentlemen, Agent Peter Strzok gave us the timeline yesterday that following his work on the Hillary Clinton email investigation, he was assigned as the lead agent of the Russia collusion investigation from late July of 2016 until May of 2017. Then in late May of 2017, following your appointment of Robert Mueller, Agent Strzok became part of Special Counsel Mueller's investigative team until late July of 2017 when he was removed by Special Counsel Mueller and returned to the FBI. Any disagreement about that timeline?
I don't know the precise dates, but that sounds generally accurate.
All right. During 11 hours of testimony yesterday, Agent Strzok testified at length about his roles during that year from late July of 2016 to late July of 2017 as part of those investigative teams. He testified, in fact, that he drafted the initial investigative plan on the Russia collusion investigation, that he made investigative decisions and took actions to gather information and collect evidence in both the Trump-Russia matter and the special counsel probe. Agent Strzok also admitted that before and during that same year...
A point of order, Mr. Chairman. We had a closed hearing on Peter Strzok. If you want to tolerate his testimony like this, release the transcript. Have an open hearing. Don't characterize and not let him testify. Don't take things out of context. Release his transcript.
That is not a valid point of order. The gentleman proceed.
So Agent Strzok also... Agent Strzok also...
Gentleman state his point of order.
I assume it is a valid point of order to object to quoting or characterizing statements in a confidential setting.
Release the transcript, Mr. Chairman. The American people deserve to hear Peter Strzok's testimony under oath. Do not hide his testimony.
Wait, let him rule on my point of order.
The testimony, Mr. Chairman, as you know from transcribed interviews can be used for hearing purposes.
Release the transcribed interview to the American people.
The transcript will be released to the American people at the appropriate time, but the gentleman can use it for the purpose of this question to the witness in the hearing.
We were under the impression, Mr. Chairman, that these hearings, that these transcripts were not to be quoted.
The chair has ruled.
Gentlemen, so Agent Strzok also admitted that before and during that same year, all right. Agent Strzok admitted that before and during that same year, he sent many, many text messages about Donald Trump. Text messages that we've already established and you've agreed.
It's going. It's a little recalcitrant.
The gentleman finished? So again, Agent Strzok sent many text messages about Donald Trump. We've established, and you've agreed, that those reflect a hatred and bias towards Donald Trump. Now, I reviewed with Agent Strzok, and he confirmed that he was, in fact, the person who sent the text messages that said, F Trump, Trump is an effing idiot, that talked about stopping Trump from becoming president, that talked about impeaching Trump as the president, that talked about protecting the country from Trump, and talked about an insurance policy against the risk of a Trump presidency, just to name a few. Those are the very same texts, by the way, that Inspector General Horowitz, as you know, characterized as deeply troubling and expressed his concern that Agent Strzok may have acted upon the bias expressed in those Trumps in prioritizing his work on the Russia collusion investigation on the Wiener laptop issue, a matter that he's now investigating. Now, when I asked Agent Strzok about his conversations with Special Counsel Mueller or anyone on his team about his removal, he described the details of a single conversation. He said it lasted about 10 or 15 minutes, but certainly less than 30 minutes. He said Special Counsel Mueller made it very clear that he was being removed from the case because of the text messages, but I was surprised that he said that neither Special Counsel Mueller or anyone on his team asked him about the text or his expressed hatred of Donald Trump. He said special counsel never asked him what he meant when he sent those texts. He said that special counsel Mueller never asked him if he acted upon the bias and the hatred reflected in those texts. I asked Agent Strzok at least a half a dozen times, did special counsel Mueller or anyone on his team ever ask you about these troubling text messages and whether any of your actions taken, whether any of your decisions made, and whether any of the evidence you collected may have been corrupted or tainted or in any way influenced by the hatred, bias, or prejudice expressed in these texts? He repeatedly and unequivocally said no. Yes, we know that special counsel Mueller removed him from the case, but what did special counsel Mueller do to determine whether or how the actions taken, the decisions made, and the evidence gathered by a Donald Trump-hating lead investigator, how that may have prejudiced Donald Trump as a subject? Evidence, by the way, that Agent Strzok unequivocally stated in the presence of FBI counsel that became part of the special counsel Mueller's foundational evidence and that was used by the special counsel team. If special counsel Mueller was here, I know what I would ask him, but he's not, but his supervisor is. So, Mr. Deputy Attorney General, what, if anything, has special counsel Mueller done to determine whether the actions taken, the decisions made, and the evidence collected by Special Agent Peter Strzok was impacted by his very clear hatred and bias of President Trump?
Congressman, as I know you're aware, Director Mueller has vast experience both as a prosecutor and as a supervisor of the FBI. So I can assure you that he understands the importance of considering any credibility issues in determining whether or not to rely upon a person. With regard to the...
Well, so let me stop you. So what actions has he taken as his supervisor?
Well, we're not going to talk publicly about the substance of the investigation.
I don't want you to do that. Can you
So
tell me whether you know he has
Yes.
taken steps to determine?
Yes, Director Mueller has taken appropriate steps. And keep in mind, Congressman...
Well, so let me stop you there. I'm thrilled to hear that he's taken steps. You and I are both former prosecutors. How does a prosecutor go about eliminating bias, prejudice, and expressed hatred from foundational evidence? Because you know, of course, that if your root evidence is fairly called into question, everything that comes from that evidence is fairly called into question, right?
Sir. Yes, I realize I'm just about out of time, but to give a somewhat comprehensive response, as you know, when we conduct an investigation, the purpose is to determine whether or not there's sufficient evidence to prove a case in court. And if you're going to court and you're taking a piece of evidence, you're relying upon a witness, you need to consider any issues that go to the credibility of the witness or the credibility of the evidence. And so you use the term foundational evidence. I'm not sure exactly what you have in mind, but if, for example, Director Mueller were to rely upon a document that Mr. Strzok produced or a statement that he took or were to call him as a witness, obviously you need to consider that evidence that would be evidence that would tend to impeach his credibility. And Director Mueller well knows that. And I just wanted to quickly respond if I could, and I recognize we're out of time, but Director Mueller and I learned about this issue at the same time. And we learned about it from the Inspector General, brought it to our attention soon after he discovered it. I believe it was last July. And so it was our understanding that the Inspector General was conducting an investigation of Mr. Strzok. So the fact that Director Mueller didn't spend a lot of time questioning him, I think that was probably appropriate because that was the Inspector General's job. But I would also point out that I don't think it took Director Mueller very long after seeing those text messages to decide what was the right thing to do.
Thank you. I yield back.